What's happening, everybody? Thanks for tuning back in. I'm going to try and make this one short and sweet for you. We're going to just kind of cover the markets. We're going to cover some news, go into the Bitcoin chart, and yeah, I'll leave you with that. So I'm back on a pretty decent day. You know, over the past, I don't know, I want to say 2 or 3 days, we've seen, you know, decent consolidation. And if you're using Profit Trailer or any of these other trading softwares that are out there, or you're doing manual trading, this is a good opportunity. You know, for me, when we're sitting in this sideways motion here in between these channels, like that is where I feel that I make the most profits in Profit Trailer with whatever trading software that you're using. When you have these massive pumps and dumps, it's probably where you're going to do a little better if you're a more experienced manual trader, but it's just kind of to each their own. I know I definitely have people watching these videos who are not using trading softwares. So, you know, you probably could have caught some nice swings here if you're following the indicators correctly. But one thing I want to just kind of bring to light before we get too deep into this is we've definitely seen some nice price action here. So let's just go from here, from the bottom to where we got rejected, roughly 5.2%. Okay. So I'm seeing a lot of people calling for the next bull run. We're going to 20,000. We're out of this bear market now. I disagree. 5% is great. And I think that was much needed, especially for a lot of people who got smashed in this downtrend. But let's pump the brakes and let's take a look at how deep this fall was. And this was about 15%. So, I mean, give or take a percentage point or two here or there. But I mean, this move was not nearly as significant as this move down. And so that's something I just want to keep in mind. Like the fact that we're seeing a green day does not mean that it's impossible for more green day or more red days to come in our near future. I'm more on the bearish opinion, but I also, you know, I'd love to be proven wrong here. And it's just the way you play it, right? Like you can't always play the market bullish, because if you do, you'll get burned. And especially if you're buying a bunch of these altcoins that, you know, a lot of these altcoins, you know, this kind of brings me into my next topic for the videos. A lot of these altcoins, I don't think are going to be around in a while. And so that's why, you know, I've made videos about how to choose an altcoin. Cause I think the biggest difference in this past bull run that we saw, back in 2017, was the fact that everybody thought they were buying, you know, legitimate portions of these companies, when in reality you're buying a token, you're buying, you know, something to help that company profit more, but you're not getting any equity in that company. And so I think a lot of these tokens really don't provide a lot of value for the actual investor in the token. They provide a lot of value in the investment for the shareholders, but especially if it's a private company, you're never getting into that, you know, sort of position. So, oops, what am I doing here? So what I have been looking at, especially since, you know, one of these last downtrends, where did it start kind of? I guess this is on the daily, but one of the biggest indicators for me is looking at these inside bars, and even on the daily, like that's a really good, signal. But the problem is when you have something like this, where you just have these whales just dumping, or whatever was going on here. We kind of spoke about that. Maybe it was the BitMEX stuff. I'm not really sure. But one good indication is these inside bars. And when you see this red candle that just stops out, it's within the previous bar. That's a good indication of which direction you may be heading. So, you know, what I'm looking at here is you saw the same thing. You saw this red inside bar, and we continued to the downside. And then you kind of see a green inside bar, and you start to continue to the upside. Now, I think the upside is a lot less significant than the downside, obviously, because if you're looking on the daily or even the weekly chart, you're going to see that we're definitely still in this bear trend. And on the weekly, it looks even worse. So this is something to definitely pump the brakes on. Keep in mind that you got to be looking at all of these time frames, and you got to kind of work yourself, you know, in and out of these time frames. That's kind of what I do. I'm filtering through the charts multiple times before I'm ever making a decision. So once I've kind of checked out the daily, I'll go down to the 4-hour and get an idea of where are we sitting right now, like right this instant. Well, it looks to me like we're forming this bearish inside bar. We still have 3 hours left, so we have a long time. So I'm not convinced that this is going to be a bearish candle. So it's kind of something I don't want to even really look at. But we saw an inside bar here. We've continued to the downside. We can continue back. Like even here, we saw one. We saw a big dump. The same idea. We saw one here, and then 3 or 4 candles later, we saw this massive decrease. It's just, to me, this is something I look at, and it's not my end-all be-all. I wouldn't use this as your only trading technique, but it's something to kind of keep in mind. And you can do the same thing with the bullish candles, right? These little green inside bars here. It just means that the bulls and the bears are battling it out. Who's going to win? And ultimately, when you have that inside bar, it gives the advantage to the bears in this situation. And so I'll kind of keep digging down, maybe down to the 1 hour, and get an idea of where we're sitting. And we had a couple inside bars, continued down. Bulls fought back. We tested this 50 or this 6,530-ish, somewhere in there. And then we had another inside bar. We're getting rejected. So what I'm looking for here is we're definitely sitting in this channel, and we've been talking about these for a while now. We were sitting in this channel up here, and we thought this was all good. We're looking at good price action, and the bears came out to play. So I'm not convinced that we're going to stay in here. I'm not really looking too much into the Elliott wave theory right now. I'm looking more at just previous price action, these new support lines here, these resistance lines. This is kind of like where we're going to be battling just to get back up to where we were towards the beginning of September. So it's what I'm looking at. I'm definitely leaning a little more bearish. I definitely think that there's some serious support on the downside here, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. So the next thing I wanted to get into is the news. So nothing really significant broke over the past 24 hours to kind of give us this push, which is why I think this is just kind of natural market movement. And especially if you're in this bearish market, I don't see the follow through, really. It wasn't impulsive. This is definitely not the start of some massive bull run. I hope to be proven wrong on that. That would be great. But just even looking at just the volume, there's just not a lot of follow through. So to me, with this inside bar forming here on the daily, we'll kind of see what happens. And I'm kind of expecting a retracement. Back to the news. So like I said, not much in the news. There are a couple of things that I want to cover. So if we go right here, so blockchain could boost trade finance by $1 trillion, the WEF research says. This is a pretty interesting article. If you want to read it, I'll link it in the description. But more or less what I get out of this article is that there's a big gap for small and medium-sized enterprises in both emerging markets and just in general, right? And they're saying that, trade finance and, basically financing in general, crediting for these smaller companies, there's a $1.5 trillion supply and demand gap. So these small businesses, especially in the booming worldwide economy right now, I guess not worldwide, but at least in the United States, the demand for these small businesses, they're for sure, they need money, right? You need money to pay your employees. You need money for inventory, et cetera, et cetera. And so what's happening is there's a supply and demand gap. And I think that's driving a lot of these small and medium-sized enterprises to not be able to secure certain funding as easily as maybe some major mega corporation, right? And so this is kind of an interesting article. It says, according to an Asian Development Bank calculation, the global trade finance gap is currently at 1.5 trillion and estimated to grow to 2.4 trillion by 2025. It says the issue largely arises from limited access to credit and loans for small and medium-sized enterprises that are looking to expand their businesses. So basically what this article is talking about is they're saying that this is a really interesting idea for blockchain to come into the space and mitigate this sort of, or close this gap, I should say. And that's something that's kind of been doing on the more retail front, I think, with some of these other crypto projects. I'm sure there's a lot more than just Salt, but that's one of them. And to me, Salt was just a little bit too expensive, right? Like their interest charges are just a little bit too expensive to really make that jump from traditional financing over into the crypto world. But if millions, or I shouldn't say millions, but if thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises sort of start using crypto and blockchain as a crediting system, that could really bring a lot of not only volume but awareness to the blockchain space and really help and mitigate this gap. So that's something that's really interesting to me. I know there's a bunch of other projects doing it for more like retail investing sort of loans, you know, asset-based crediting, which is all really interesting to me. There's definitely going to be crypto for loaning people money to buy a house. There's going to be stuff like this that comes out on the market. And I think more stuff like that, the better. As long as it's run by legitimate people. And then the other thing I wanted to cover is just this one. Like, these are the only two interesting articles I could really find today. Was 10 years after Lehman, Bitcoin and Wall Street are closer than ever. So this is actually an extremely long read. I would say it's very informative if you're not too familiar with sort of Bitcoin's past, kind of where it's headed, how it got started. I'll just read this quote here. It says, "It's very clear that Satoshi was affected by the events that led up to the financial crisis of 2008. And it's obviously recorded in the Genesis block as well." So that's pretty interesting because they're referring to this part here where it says Chancellor on brick of second bailout for banks. So this was recorded in the Genesis block. And so, you know, if you weren't familiar with this information, I thought that was kind of interesting. Just the fact that we've talked about this in previous videos, is the Bitcoin was sparked. It seemingly was sparked, because we don't know for certain, but I mean, that pretty much tells us, based on the global financial crisis that happened in 2008. And I think that with our current financing system, the fiat currency sort of catastrophe that's been looming over our heads for years and years is going to cause for another, you know, major transfer of wealth at some point in time. And that's really going to be interesting. And I think, you know, maybe this was some foreshadowing of the financial system. You know, let's not fix the broken system. Let's build a new one. And that's kind of what happened with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as a whole. And this is one of the main reasons, you know, I've talked about this in previous videos, this is the main reason I'm bullish on Bitcoin long term, is due to the financial climate of the world. You're seeing all of these, Argentina, Greece, like, name the country that's having, you know, fiat currency issues, and name the countries that have had fiat currency issues in the past. And you'll see that it really just is a broken system. And so something like Bitcoin, and it may not be Bitcoin in the long term, but I think right now it's positioned best to handle some sort of global financial crisis once again, and give people a place to kind of harbor their value, to give them a store of value like everybody says Bitcoin is. And that kind of brings me back to the first point I said, which was a lot of these altcoins are not a store of value. A lot of these altcoins are just existing to facilitate the blockchain, right? And it just depends on what currency you're talking, or what coin you're talking about. But things like Binance coin is different, right? Like, I think BNB coin has a true use case, because it brings the end customer a better experience by holding that coin, because you're literally saving money on fees. So things that actually help the customer and the end user is the way to go. And there's hundreds of coins out there that can do that. With that said, don't be too bearish. If we do head down, it's all going to be good. With that, I'll catch you all on the next one. Take it easy, guys.